Hi students, this is Shivakrishna working as a assistant professor in Anurag Engineering College, Civil Department. Today I am explaining the subject of Structural Engineering 2. This is also called design of steel structures. Here, first of all, we have to know about the introduction of the steel structures and what are the units involved in the steel structures and what type of connections it should be involved in that structural engineering. This all are should have to know about that all the things. Here, first of all, we have to tell about that. First of all, you have to introduction what type of design it should be implemented in the design of the connections. In here, the limit state design should be considered in the design of steel structures. In that, the type of connections and IS 800 2007 codebook should be followed for design of the steel structures. Here, first, we are taking the concept of connections in the given in the steel structure should be elaborately explained in this session. So coming to connections, connections are very important role playing on the one design of steel structures. These connections are devices. It is used to joint the two plates or two members in that particular scenario. In that structure, the point says that forces that can be transferred between the joints is safely, and the major structural failures have been some form of the connections as the failure, and steel connections have to direct influence on the cost of the framing system, and the connection may be efficient. It should be used for material, and still it is very expensive to erect the total design structures. In here, the components of connection, first of all, coming to bolts is having one nut and one threads have to coupled with that scenario. See here, the figure shows that the head of that bolt it should be capable to maintain the proper head, and after that without threads it is called it is a shank, and that threads it is help to the nut rotating on that threads and fixing on that particular scenario. That is called total length of that bolt, and after that it is the combination of bolt with help with of head and the nut it should be connected. This type of bolts are very expensive and very tightly, and it should have to maintain very proper strength. And after that, rivets. Coming to rivets, the difference between the rivets and bolts having the thread system, but rivets are only shank you have to provide it. This is there is no thread system it should be involved in that particular rivets. This type of rivets are used very common type of structures like minor structures like windows and glass fittings, and some of the branch of the steel structures. This type of rivets may be used, and after that, coming to welding. Other than that, that is one of the bolting or one of the riveting. Other third connection also there, that is welding. In this welding scenario, what is the thickness of the welding it should be provided on that particular system, and what is the length of the weld it should be capable to bearing of that load on that particular connection. You should have to must design for that what is the length of the weld and what is the thickness of the weld. Here you should have to provide on that particular scenario. This is the throat section. This throat involving the what is the angle of welding it should be provided on that scenario, and after that what is the thickness and what is the length of the connection it should be provided on that particular scenario. And here see that connection of the plates and connecting the angles. Here two scenarios should be involved in that particular situation. First of all, connecting the plates. In this connecting the plates, there should be the one plate connected to another plate. First one is the I joint, I section, and I section of the beam that should be connected to the another I section of that column. These two connections we are using the bolting connection, and after here connecting angles. Indian standard angles like L section or T sections, it have to provide on that particular scenario. We are using the I section beams and I section columns connecting with the angle sections. And coming to types of connections, there are connecting depending upon the type of loading, strength and stiffness, economy, difficulty and ease of erections. These all are depending upon the connections. First of all, we are coming to based upon the connections means there are three types of connections we are generally preferred in the present scenario. First one is bolted connections, second one is welded connections, and the third one riveted connections. And we are seeing the previous slide bolted connections, welded connection, riveted connection. We know the difference between the bolted, riveted and welded. Based upon the force, here on that connection, two types of movements or two types of load acting on that particular connections, that is the shear connection and movement connections. Here the beam and column it should be splice means that is the extra plate you have to provide on that particular scenario. In the situation coming to bolted connections, bolting it is the method of connecting members at that site. Several types of bolts you have to use in the bolted connection. What are the types of bolted connections means unfinished bolts or black bolts, or this is also called C grade types of bolts. And second one turned bolts. This type of bolts it is coming to grade of A bolts, and semi precision bolts are coming to that is also called B grade type of bolts. And after that high strength friction grip bolts also we are using the large dam sites and reservoir sites. Coming to black bolts, it is the most common type of bearing bolts. It should be referred to as the ordinary bolts only. Why? Because this type of bolts are very frequently used in the particular structures. They are popular since they are economical and both in the terms of materials and installation costs as very less. And the force transfer mechanism under the shear, see this figure, this type of connections it is the black bolts. This for the force transferred in the bearing between the plates and bolts of the bolt holes, this is the bolt and that is the bolt hole. This type of bolt inserted in that hole, there should be acting some stresses. That type of stresses will be acting inner point of your joint, that is called bearing stresses. This type of stresses, the failures may be occurred by shivering failures and bearing failures. We have to design point of view of the shear strength and bearing strength. And what is the disadvantage of this? This type of bolt connections implement undergo some slipping will be occurred on that particular scenario. And after that high strength grip bolts, they are the very high strength bolts and the gripping of action is very high. These high strength friction grip bolts joints, high strength bolts are pre-tensioned. It is made in the making in the factories. In here the pressure is developed between the plates should be joint should be transferred on that load. When the external shear force is applied, the friction stress to slip between the plates and prevent the relative slip. Next, bolt shear transfer mechanism high strength friction bolts. Only when externally applied force exceeds the frictional resistance between the plates slip and the bolts bearing against on that holes. This type of slip it should be reserve the strength to the bearing. And after that this type of bolted connection should be provided in two joints, that is the one of the lap joint and one is the butt joint. What is the meaning of lap joint? One plate, another plate, it should be overhanging on that particular scenario. That is called lap joint. In that particular series sphere, single shear and double shear, we have to provide on that single critical section, that is called single shear, and we have to provide in the double critical sections. We have to provide in the double shearing bolt. This here, two members are to be connected together by the overlapping, then the joint is called lap joint. It is a single bolted lap joint and a double bolted lap joint as shown figure. And after that, butt joint. What is the butt joint means? Two joints are parallelly meet them, and after that the extra plates will be provided on that particular scenario. This is called butt joint. Two members are to be connected by the placing of members end to end, and additional plates to be provided either side, that is top side or bottom side or both sides have to provide on that particular, that is called butt joint. Which joint is better? In this case, double cover butt joint, the total shear force to be transmitted by the members, it is split into two parts and the force acts on each of. But the case of lap joint, there is only one plate, it should be forces acting on, therefore the shear capacity of that bolt, butt joint and double cover butt joint, it should be bolted in the lap joint. See here, this type of figures that is connected in the one of the lap joint example, and figure number second is butt joint example. This type of shearing forces and the bearing and development should be on that particular joint. It should be very high compared to lap joint. Butt joint is very high. And committed to riveted connections, this type of connections mostly preferred in the railway bridges. Why? Because here the shank extension providing is very negotiable. So this type of connections it should be provided on the rivet joints is very preferable. Why? See here, riveted joints are very rare modern steel concrete practice. It is used in the railway bridges in India. It is very similar to bearing type of bolted connections. After that, riveted lap joint and butt joint. This also comes under lap joint, single riveted lap joint and a double riveted lap joint. And coming to butt joint, single riveted single cover butt joint, single riveted double cover butt joint, or double rivet double cover butt joint. And coming to welded connections, welded connections are direct and efficient. It means transferring the forces from one member to adjacent member. Welded connections are generally made by melting base metal from the jointed with weld metal, which upon cooling form the connections. The weld connection in a majority in this case characterized by two types. One is the fillet weld and one is the butt weld. These are the fillet welds. See here, it is two surfaces adjacent joined together, that is called fillet weld. And but butt weld means another filling the gap between the contact surfaces with the weld seal in the process of fusing the metals, and also it's together. What are the main difference between fillet weld and butt weld? Fillet weld it is very simple, but butt weld it is complicated to erection, and it is fast and it is economical to making, and this more expensive. Why? Because number of our strength and the cross sectional area of the weld is very high. So no, and in the fillet weld no prior edge preparation necessary, but here the fabrication to as strong as the member does not require any skilled labor. In the fillet weld you should have, butt weld more number of skilled labor required. And fillet weld it is look like as less attractive, but in butt weld the better appearance and compared to fillet weld. Next, poorer performance compared to butt weld, but butt weld it should be very high performance gives on that particular scenarios. And in that fillet weld you have to find out the throat thickness is 0.7 times of size of the well, but in butt weld thickness equal to butt means one of the single plates. Also in this type 5 by 8 times of thickness of thinner plates. 0.7 times of S and 5 by 8 times of S. And here transfer the forces large in magnitude and it should be connection considerably reduced. Based upon the forces transferred, shear connection and bearing connection. Shear means one member should be one plate connected to another plate with the help of bolting. The shear forces may be acting on that particular joint. It should be overhang to one force to another force. And movement connections means rigid connections. This type of connections, the friction developed between the two plate surfaces is called movement. See here. This is the figure. The movements should be developed on that particular scenario and it should be very enlarging and overlapping on that particular steel plates. Beam and column splices. One beam and column it should be connected. This type of connection. This type of splices means extra plates will be provided on that particular scenario. This type of bolted column splices and it should be rolled I sections like hollow sections as shown figure. These all are rigid members only. Here plastic analysis are very low, so in this type of beam and column splices it is required in the joint structural members along their length due to available length of the sections being limited and also due to transportation and erection constraints. This type of joints it is called splices. And after that, this typical bolted column splices used for the rolled I section and hollow section members as shown in figure. See here, this is the rectangular hollow section connected to another hollow section and circular hollow section connected to another circular hollow section quite opposite. This type of overhanging should be provided in the bolting connection and after that riveting connections also may have to provide in that particular scenario. These total connections it should be basically three types. One is the bolted connection, one is the riveted connection and one is the welded connection. Bolted means in this lap joint and butt joint you have to mostly preferable, and welding means butt weld or fillet weld you should have to maintain very high. Okay, thank you students.